Hello there. Welcome in. Glad to have you, whether you're listening on Extra Sports 1300, 740 KVOR, or you're listening on the streaming apps of those two fine radio stations, which you can find anywhere. Digital streaming apps are given away because they are free to download, free to use, and sponsored by Diversus Health, mental health, and well-being for all. It will be a veritable cornucopia of sports topics over the course of the program, and I'd love to get your thoughts. 719-247-1313. You could call or text into the show using that number. Producer Ray standing by, eagerly awaiting your correspondence. We'll get into the Avs. Significant health-related updates to share. And some potential game one lines to discuss. Not betting lines, hockey lines. So we'll get into that, but I can't. I know everybody's been on this radio station today has been starting with this. I can't go in a different direction to start. And that, what I'm talking about is what we saw from Victor Wembanyama last night. Now, if you tuned into the show yesterday, you know that I discussed the possibility of Victor Wembanyama going off in game one against the Oklahoma City Thunder. And I said, we haven't seen motivated and angry Victor Wembanyama rolled into one, and I'm fascinated to see what that looks like. And that's what we got last night. Victor Wembanyama watching SGA get handed the trophy that he made an impassioned plea for. Pretty good impassioned plea, if I may add that. And then the cameras show him sitting with his head down as that's going on. Dylan Harper comes over, or Steph Castle came over to say something to him. And I knew, like, Wemby's going to be special tonight. But this is not me patting myself on the back, because even I could not fully comprehend what we were about to see. Victor Wembanyama was unbelievable in last night's game. I thought he'd be motivated. I thought he'd be good. I thought that San Antonio would win game one. But the impact he made in that game and the numbers he put up are just ridiculous. 41 points and 24 rebounds. That's what angry, motivated Victor Wembanyama gets you in game one of the Western Conference Finals. Becomes, coincidentally, the first player to put up 40 and 20 in a playoff game since Nikola Jokic did it almost a year to the day in game one against the Oklahoma City Thunder. But it is the list of guys who have put up 40 and 20 in a playoff game read like the best of the best that have ever played this game. Jokic is on the list. Giannis is on the list from more recent times, but there's Shaq, there's Elgin Baylor, there's Will Chamberlain. So he joined some elite company in helping the San Antonio Spurs take game one against OKC. And if you think, oh, no, that Wemby wasn't motivated by what he saw. Oh, yes, he was. Here was Wemby right after the game.
That was in your mind at all, knowing that Shea had got that award and you were in the top three for it? And, you know, did any part of tonight feel personal? Some of your facial expressions kind of look like you were really, really going for it.
Yeah, for sure. Everything you just said.
I like angry, motivated Victor Wembanyama. That was an unbelievable performance that is encapsulated by the three-pointer that he hit with 26 seconds left in the first overtime. Like, that is the epitome of tonight is my night. I'm going to do whatever the hell I want to do, and it's going to work. Because there is no reason, none whatsoever, for him to take that shot in that moment with that much time left on the shot clock. Zero. But if you watch that game, did you not know that was going in? I think everybody thought, Ray felt it. I felt it. Other people in the hallways here, we're talking to them. They felt it. I've heard other people on the radio talking. Like, it's not everybody, we're not doing the LeBron thing here where we're acting as if if you were watching the game, you were just in the moment with Victor Wembanyama, and as bad of a decision as that may have been in any other basketball game, in that moment, as soon as he stepped into that shot, you knew it was going in, because that's the kind of night that Victor Wembanyama had. And it reminded me of something that I think as a Nuggets fan, you may feel a little bit jealous towards Spurs fans that they're experiencing this now. What that game last night, that moment last night, reminded me of. Think back to 2019, Game 3 between the Denver Nuggets and the Portland Trailblazers. That was a game that went 4 overtimes. And now the Blazers ended up winning that game, as you might recall. But Nikola Jokic in that game played 65 minutes, scored 33 points, grabbed 18 rebounds, and dished out 14 assists. That was the moment. Now, we followed Nikola Jokic from the beginning. We knew we had the discussion about, Yusuf Nurkic or Nikola Jokic, and only one guy can remain. And when Michael Malone pivoted and started using him to bring the ball up and facilitate the offense, like, we saw a special player developing right in front of our eyes. But in that Game 3 in 2019, which was not only Jokic, but the Denver Nuggets kind of introduction to the broader basketball world, right? The biggest stage that the Nuggets had ever played on, with that group in a pivotal Game 3 on the road, and Nikola Jokic took over that basketball game. And remembering back to that night, I had the same thoughts that I'm sure are running through the heads of Spurs fans. And maybe they've kind of felt this for a little while with Victor Wembanyama, having watched him. Again, if you watch him night in and night out, there's probably other moments that you go back where you had this kind of feeling. But this is now the entire NBA world catching up and all being on the same page. And the feeling behind it is, with this Spurs team, anything is possible. Anything and everything. They have a player that you literally cannot put a ceiling on. You cannot put a cap on what Victor Wembanyama could accomplish in his career, and by extension, what this Spurs team can do. And you felt that back in 2019 with Nikola Jokic. Like, this is just a guy who is so uncommon, so special, that your mind, especially like the Spurs have kind of been, I'm not saying through this exact thing, but they had Duncan, they had championships with the Denver Nuggets. It was like we'd never seen anything remotely close to this. It's a franchise that never won a championship. It's a franchise that has had great players, Alex English, David Thompson, Carmelo Anthony, in different eras, but never what Jokic was. Never a player that made you feel like that. Like there's no telling what this team could do. And that's what the feeling is with the Spurs right now. And you're having it too because the Spurs are making you believe. And I've fought this thought for a while now. They're pushing back against the notion that they got to wait their turn. That they got to go through the ups and downs, the hardships of the postseason, like Nikola Jokic did, right? They lost to Portland, right? Then the next year they go to the Western Conference Finals in the bubble, but then they lose that. And then you know what happens thereafter. With the Spurs, it's like you're not supposed to be doing this. I think one player that, not to take the shine away from Wemby, but look at what Dylan Harper did last night. He's a rookie getting a spot start, and he's putting up 24 points. Like, this just feeds into it. The Spurs are not supposed to be able to beat OKC. Every piece of logic that has been drilled into our brains over years and decades of watching sports, not just the NBA, but every sport. You got to wait your turn. You got to build up that scar tissue. You can't just show up here, especially in the Western Conference with the Thunder and the Wolves and the Nuggets. You can't just show up here, crash the party, and go to an NBA Finals. That's not supposed to happen. You're supposed to ask, if Victor Wembanyama is ever going to be. We ask after year one of these guys in the playoffs if it's ever going to happen. And I know there were some of these questions with Nikola Jokic by the time that series was over. Well, Jokic, not really. No, maybe not a clutch player. Like, we're supposed to have those ridiculous conversations. We're supposed to make the year, the offseason and the entire season about you. And are you going to get over the hump? And are you going to take the next step? The Nuggets, Tim Connolly was famous around these parts for saying we don't skip steps. Different context, but that saying is running through my head. The Spurs are skipping like 8 steps, and they're just going toe-to-toe with a team that everyone was so sure was going to become a dynasty, with the back-to-back MVP on the other team. Now, knowing Victor Wembanyama, and this is kind of why all of this is happening, and why it's possible that San Antonio could end up beating the Oklahoma City Thunder. I just think Wemby's mentality is so different and light years ahead of where it should be at 22 years old. This guy is more wired for winning and wired for greatness than almost any 22-year-old. Certainly not one since probably LeBron. And before that, name another player, but you listen to Victor Wembanyama talk and you see him in the offseason hanging out with monks and doing, working with Hakeem Olajuwon and all of this kind of stuff that he's done. He is, I don't know, like the documentary that's probably going to be made in the next year is going to be fascinating because his upbringing is going to be the stuff of legend. We're going to be watching the way he was brought up and we're not raising our kids that way. But he is so wired for greatness and winning at such a young age that it's almost like he's this grizzled veteran that is leading a young team around him. Victor Wembanyama and Steph Castle and Dylan Harper, these guys are peers. They're not the young guys coming in. This isn't Kawhi Leonard joining up with Tim Duncan. Victor Wembanyama is 22 years old, but he's got the wisdom and the maturity of a guy 10 years older than he is. And you just see it with Dylan Harper and Steph Castle in this Spurs team. Like, they don't play like a young team as long as Victor Wembanyama is on the court. Right? The game he was kicked out of, the game that he missed in the Portland series because of the concussion, you watch the Spurs and you're like, okay, they're a young team. But when Wemby's there, he ties everybody together. And how could you not, if you're a Dylan Harper, whatever belief you have in yourself, I'm sure he's a very confident guy. How could that confidence not be multiplied by 10 when you're playing next to this guy? A guy that the reigning champions are starting to dribble into the paint, see that he's there, and making a hard left turn and saying, nope. Like, I don't want to throw out the word scared, but I'm having a hard time finding a synonym that is acceptable. Like, how could you not play with that guy and say, again, anything and everything is possible? It doesn't matter that they're the defending champs. It doesn't matter that we're a bunch of 20-year-olds. We got Victor Wembanyama, and he could put up 41 and 24 in his first Western Conference Finals game ever and hit a ridiculous three-pointer. Just oozing confidence with 26 seconds left in overtime. I mean, it's just remarkable. And the jealousy part that I mentioned earlier comes in because now we here in Colorado are kind of on the backside of this. Like, that moment came, it built up. We got the one title, and now we're on the downside, and we're trying to figure out how we're going to salvage the rest of Nikola Jokic's career. The unlimited upside, the unlimited potential. I think if you're a Nuggets fan, you'd give anything to go back to that day when the entire NBA world was like, oh, this Jokic guy, he's just different. That's what I felt like watching last night. And now it's, in a world where nothing lives up to the hype. Did game one exceed the hype? I think it did. And now this is going to be must-watch television other than the local hockey club kind of being on the same night. Just unbelievable. Unbelievable what Victor Wembanyama was able to do. Here's Wemby speaking to that feeling of anything is possible. Here's Wemby on the message that the Spurs sent in game one.
The message would be that we as a team are ready to go in any environment, in any place, against anybody. And even though we still got a lot to learn, our effort should be over anybody else's. And tonight we were relentless.
Relentless. It's a great word, but here's the issue. A bunch of 20-year-olds shouldn't be relentless. They shouldn't have the confidence to be able to go into, some teams are naive. This isn't naivete. This is belief. This Spurs team believes they can beat OKC. They believe that they're going to outwork a team that's the whole idea of the Thunder is how much they outwork their opponents. It shouldn't be happening. And I've been saying it all year long. This is the year before the year where we're having a conversation about the San Antonio Spurs. Take your thoughts. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, we'll get into the hockey. Let's hear from the enemy, shall we? The Vegas Golden Knights speaking on their matchup, which begins tomorrow night in the Western Conference Finals against the Colorado Avalanche. One more sleep. That's all. One more sleep. And then it will be time for game one between the Colorado Avalanche and the Vegas Golden Knights. 6 o'clock tomorrow night. You can hear it on Extra Sports 1300. Want to bring you some thoughts before game one from behind enemy lines, so to speak, and get the perspective of Vegas, because I think it's always very interesting to hear what the opponent thinks of the Colorado Avalanche, rather than more people who are around the Avs every day. What do the Vegas Golden Knights think about the Avs and what they present? So John Tortorella, and this is a little bit lengthy, a lot of thoughts here that John Tortorella shared on the Colorado Avalanche, and I think it's really revealing what John Tortorella said about the Avs.
I'm not going to talk a whole bunch about them, but we certainly respect them. They have been the top team of the National Hockey League all year long. We know that. Come to playoffs, we join together, right? I think it's two good teams, probably playing some of their best hockey starting the series. Let's have at it.
Okay, I may have oversold John Tortorella there a little bit. We respect them. They've been one of the best teams all year long. But even then, he threw in we join together. Like, they're here for a reason, certainly, but so are we. Right? And it would be nice if John Tortorella would go a little bit more in depth. Jared Bednar has certainly gone in depth on Mitch Marner and some of these players. Some coaches are like this, where they don't. I think it's twofold. I think it's one, that some coaches think that any piece of information they share, even if it's just complimenting the other team, is giving away some kind of competitive advantage. So if he says, Nathan MacKinnon, what he does really well is skate to his right, then John Tortorella might feel like he's giving away the game plan that they're going to force him left. So it's a little bit of the paranoid head coach in John Tortorella that's not wanting to wax poetic on how good the Colorado Avalanche are. But it's the other part of this too, is you don't want to make this bigger than what it is. Right? If John Tortorella starts hyping up, man, it starts with McKinnon and blah, 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 and McCarr and then Landeskog in their fourth line with Parker Kelly. He just keeps going on and on and on. And the thought kind of starts to permeate that, man, this Avalanche team, Vegas can't match up with them. I think John Tortorella knows good and well how much the Colorado Avalanche are a quantum leap from either of the two teams that Vegas has faced in these playoffs. If he were to start going down the list and saying, Avs have this, Anaheim and Utah don't, and then it would just give that air. And I don't think John Tortorella wants to. But that's the fact of the matter. This is a far greater test for Vegas than it is for Colorado. And it's not to say that for Colorado, it's not a difficult test. In fact, I think that Vegas will be the toughest series they've had so far. But the jump from Minnesota to Vegas is not what the jump is from Anaheim to the Avs. And the more that John Tortorella waxes poetic about this Avalanche team, the more that thought creeps in that they're an absolute wagon and they are without peer in our conference. Because I said this last week, I don't know how you could watch, I'm speaking about the Vegas Golden Knights, when they turn on their film, in a quiet moment to themselves, never out loud, how are we going to beat this team 4 out of 7? Right. I just think that's the reality of the situation. It's not impossible, but man, you got to dig deep. You got to find everything you can to try and beat the Avalanche 4 out of 7. And we all thought that Minnesota was going to be whoever came out of the Dallas Minnesota series was going to be a huge test for the Colorado Avalanche, and they beat Minnesota in 5 games. In 2 of the games, they dominated. So I think that's the other part at play here is let's not make Goliath into an even bigger Goliath than they already are. But in the same vein as not making something bigger than what it is, I always laugh at these questions because it becomes, it's just so normal for us that we don't even think about it, and we have to be reminded. And man, do our local teams remind us every chance they get. Did you know that Denver is 5,280 feet above sea level? John Tortorella asked about playing at altitude.
Overrated. We're certainly aware of it, right? We're aware of it, and you have to be. But I think if you spend too much time talking about it and fixing this, going here, going there, oxygen there, I think it manifests itself into something bigger than it should be. We might have to catch a couple of breaths here and there along the way. We're going to play. That's all we're worried.
And we still haven't had the definitive study, I don't think, on altitude in sports. Because the way that certain teams handle it is different. I have yet to find that there is a common belief among coaches and teams in all these different sports about how to go into a game where you're playing the Broncos or the Avalanche or the Denver Nuggets. With the Colorado Rockies, teams look forward to coming to 5,280 feet because it's 3 guaranteed wins. But I think with Tortorella, and I don't fault him for any of this stuff. Like, as a guy in the media, I would like Torts to give me a little bit more here, but I understand where he's coming from. And the altitude thing, certainly, you got to nip that in the bud. You can't make that. I mean, you already have, 2 of the 3 best players on planet Earth on the other side. You have the deepest team in the NHL. They're well coached, championship DNA, all of this stuff that the Avalanche already present. And then you're going to throw on top of it, altitude is going to mess us up. You can't do it. How does it manifest itself? Maybe a shorter shift here or there. Because Vegas has a little bit more depth than Minnesota does. Maybe you see Tortorella switching out lines a little. But by game 2, I mean, it's really not going to be a thing. But you can't make it a thing. The players will feel it. Like, it exists. It's real. It's just, can these supremely well-conditioned millionaire athletes figure out some way as they're staying in their 5-star hotel and being bused from point A to point B and having all of their needs taken care of, all their meals catered? Can they find a way to battle through the altitude? Yes, I believe that they can. And I don't think altitude is going to be the reason why the Avs win game 1. But it all kind of fits together in John Tortorella understanding he's been around a long time. And by the way, John Tortorella has coached a team that's beaten the President's Trophy team. So he's got an idea of what to do. And I think that the first rule of that is just let's not make things bigger than what they are. And I listen to a lot of different Vegas Golden Knights players in their dressing room interviews, and they're all control what we could control. Look inward. That's another good way to not make your opponent out to be even greater than they already are, is focusing on yourself. But this ties into what I talked about yesterday. The uniqueness of Vegas as opposed to, or the uniqueness of both of these teams, Vegas and Colorado, as opposed to the four other teams that Colorado and Vegas had to go through. There are no surprises. These teams know what to do. They know what's required. They're not going to, take any detours into down a road that they don't need to go down. They're not easily distracted. The moment's not too big for them. All of that kind of stuff. That's what you're seeing. And everybody handles it differently. I think Jared Bednar speaks with an air of confidence. I don't think he feels like he's giving away state secrets when he showers his opponent with praise. I think he's being honest. I think that's the biggest thing with Jared Bednar. He's an honest guy. He will give you his honest assessment about their opponent and his own team. Just, different strokes, right? But I think this is a veteran coach leading a veteran group and saying, we're not going to get caught up in making this challenge out to be greater than it already is. 719-24-7, 13-13. We'll continue with Drive Time Sports and stick with hockey. How about that Game 7 last night? That's next. 719-24-7, 1313 if you want to jump in on the conversation. Albert does, and his words will be spoken by producer Ray Dominguez. Go ahead, Ray.
John Tortorella, along with most of the hockey world outside Avalanche country, believes all they need to do is get shots on net. The goalie question has not been answered, and that gives hope to the underdog.
I think that that's fair. And I talked about the X factors in this series being goaltending, or the X factor. There were some other players here and there that could be X factors, and I'll get into those a little bit later. But the X factor of this series is goaltending. And I think Albert is 100% right in terms of what Vegas perceives as the path to victory. I mean, it's not different than most everybody tries to do. I'll even add on to what Albert said. Take away time and space, test the goaltender. That's, if it is within you to be able to do those things, that's what you got to try and do against the Avalanche. And it's two sides of the eye, right? When the Avs have the puck, take away time and space. When the Avs don't have the puck, pepper their goaltender. I understand if Vegas looks at this series and goes, we could beat Scott Whitman. I mean, Vegas thinks that they're better than Minnesota, and Minnesota got to Scott Wedgwood at times. So I don't fault them for thinking that. I just don't believe that that's going to be the be-all, end-all. There are so many other aspects, and even last year in the playoffs, Dallas didn't beat Colorado because Colorado didn't have goaltending. Dallas beat Colorado because they absolutely murdered them on special teams. Which, by the way, big key for both of these teams. You want to talk about one way that Vegas is a step up in competition, special teams. Vegas is a much better special teams, all well-rounded. You take in the penalty kill and the power play. They're more well-rounded in special teams than Minnesota is. And even the game that Minnesota won, in the Avs series, you look at the goals that they scored. They didn't score 5-on-5. He scored 5-on-4, 4-on-4. And I'll say this for the Avalanche. If the Avalanche are going to lose, I think that special teams will be more of a reason than goaltending. And I know goaltender, your best penalty killer. I get that. The goaltender is a part of it. But so is the rest of the team. I don't think that Vegas may be respecting Scott Wedgwood maybe as much as he should be. I think Scott Wedgwood has shown that he is capable of being more than just a mere extension of the Colorado Avalanche in spots, in moments. But that's what Vegas is banking on. He can't do that all the time. And I don't think that they're wrong in thinking that. We got to put Scott Wedgwood under duress, under pressure for 4, 5, 6, 7 games. We cannot let up. Coincidentally, it's the same thing I'm telling the Avs to do with Carter Hart. I think both of these goaltenders, and that's why I say that the X factor in this series is goaltending, because I think that both goalies are capable of being more than serviceable, but there's also a floor. I just think Carter Hart's floor is lower than Scott Wedgwood's. at this point in their career. And I think both teams are going into this saying, if there is a weak link in the chain, and you're not going to find a lot of weak links in the Final Four. If there is a weak link for both of these teams, it's a goaltending. And I think they're both preaching that we got to make it difficult on Carter Hart and Scott Wemby. And Albert's right, but this year, what team has been able to do it? Like, in theory, absolutely right. It's what LA tried to do. It's what Minnesota tried to do. It's what 20 or 31 other teams have tried to do throughout the regular season, and yet the Avs, President's Trophy, won their division, most goals scored, least goals allowed. Like, yeah, that's the plan, but if Vegas is successful, they would be the first team this season to do it. So easier said than done is basically what I'm getting at. But as far as what Vegas is thinking, I think, Albert, you're 100% right. Let's talk for a couple minutes about that hockey game last night, shall we? And what did I say? What did I say to the Buffalo Sabres before I signed off last night? Stay out of the penalty box. You give up the first goal, okay, it happened. Not great, but okay. And then they take a penalty towards the end of the first period. It gives Montreal, they score on it because they seem to, they might be batting 1,000 on the power play in this series. But they get a second. Now it's 2-0. Right before the first intermission. Not ideal. Buffalo, early in the second, you think, gets a power play. A 4-minute double minor. They review it. Turns out Buffalo committed a penalty on their own player. Buffalo high-sticked Buffalo. So no penalty. But this is where I got to give the Sabres a lot of credit. That did not love the first period. In the second period, that would-be double minor that turned out to be some friendly fire. That can happen. That's a fluky thing. Buffalo absolutely dominated Montreal in the second period. They were flying. They were all over Dobish in that second period. It reminded me of the Avs in Game 5 against Minnesota, where the period ends and you're like, they only got one? But Buffalo stuck with it. You know, we talked about the Spurs at the beginning of the show, how they're a young team. Don't look at sometimes. I got to give Buffalo, as young as they are, as inexperienced as they are, they kept chipping away. Then they get the Darlene goal to tie it at 2, and then because we have this every night in every sport, the very controversial situation where Dobish makes a save, 5-hole. Buffalo player pokes at it. The puck gets free. And inexplicably, or the only way I can explain it, is that the referees did not see the puck getting knocked away. It was way too quick of a whistle. And they clearly missed it because that play should have been live. That play was not done yet. And that puck was sliding to the net. But, so that's the mistake on the referee's part. And I can't blame Buffalo here. What are you going to do? You just going to let the puck slowly slide across the blue paint and like try to blow on it and hope it goes a little bit faster? No, it's sitting right there. You're going to tap it in. But in doing that, you killed any chance that that was going to be reviewed and reversed in your favor. Because once a second player touches that puck, play is blown dead. It's a dead play. Can't do that. The whistle was wrong. It was the wrong whistle. But the issue was compounded because once you touch the puck as another player, if they don't and it slides in, they can review it, overturn it. But again, I can't fault Buffalo. What would you do in that situation? Because there was a chance that Dobish could have found it, dove backwards, and stopped it. So I blame the referees because they blew the whistle too quickly. And I don't blame Buffalo for tapping at that puck. It just an incredibly, I mean, to say it's unfortunate doesn't, I mean, if you're a Sabres fan, like that word doesn't do anything for it. It was, the whistle was wrong, but the rule that they enforced after it was the correct one. You can't touch the puck like that after the play is whistled down. And then Alex Newhook ends up scoring the goal, sending Montreal. It's brutal for a city that has certainly known their fair share of brutal. More Drive Time Sports. Welcome in. Appreciate you consuming this show on a daily basis, especially those of you watching the show anywhere you scroll. While you are doing that, if you don't mind liking, subscribing, following, whatever the correct vernacular is for your social media platform of choice, I would greatly appreciate it. My kids would greatly appreciate it. My son's tired of being one of the few followers that we have on YouTube. It's really making him lose respect for me. So, do that if you don't mind. And most importantly, comment. Just drop a comment on social media and we'll get to it. We can even prominently display it on the broadcast itself. If you want to reach out through more traditional means, that option available to you as well. 719-247-1313. You could call or text into the show. Well, when it comes to the Colorado Avalanche leading into tomorrow night's game one, I have good news. I have great news, and I have not as bad news as you think. Allow me to elaborate. Everybody on the Colorado Avalanche practiced today, except one guy. So the great news is everybody but one guy is practicing. The not as bad as you think it might be news is that one player is Cale Makar. But I really think that with Cale Makar, and I mentioned this yesterday, if he's good to go, his role is cemented. There's no question about, oh, do I move Cale Makar down and pair him with Josh Manson, or, do I take him off of the top power play? No, if Cale Makar is good to go, he's playing all the roles that Cale Makar does. So with these other guys, with the way Jared Bednar likes to tinker a little bit with the lineup, find the right combinations, it's more important, I think, for the other guys to practice than Cale Makar. And also, if even practice can risk exacerbating an injury that Cale Makar has, his hip or his shoulder or whatever it is, they don't tell us anything. Upper body is what they say in hockey. Whatever upper body injury is ailing him, if there's any chance that could be exacerbated, you cannot afford to exacerbate it. So his participation in practice, I don't think, is as vital as everybody else's, but yet he as a player is more vital than almost anyone other than Nathan MacKinnon. So I think that could be the reason more than anything why Cale Makar is not practicing. Jared Bednar had already said that he expected to have everybody ready for game one. So I don't believe that this is a time to panic if you're an Avalanche fan about the health of Cale Makar. Him not being on the ice is not necessarily indicative of his injury being super serious and his status for the series being up in the air. Now, the question becomes, because there's a difference between Cale Makar, being able to play and being the Cale Makar that is the best defenseman in the world and one of the top 3 players in the world, regardless of position. And that's what's going to be interesting when game one gets going tomorrow night. What percentage of Cale Makar are the Colorado Avalanche going to be getting? And is that good enough to still win the series? With the way that Nathan MacKinnon has been playing, the way that the depth of the Colorado Avalanche have been playing, and it's understandable that maybe everyone would be slightly less effective than they have been previously because of what Vegas brings to the table. I understand that, but the Avs have everything going right now. I really believe that if Cale Makar was at a percentage that is good enough for him to play, then I think that that is a percentage of Cale Makar that the Avs can use to win this series. Can you expect Cale Makar to be the best player on the ice? No. But does he have to be when you have number 29? When you are rolling essentially 4 lines on a night-to-night basis? I will take 85% of Cale Makar with the rest of that Avalanche team and pick the Avs to win this series. But this injury, and it didn't look good in game 5, right? Ran into the dude and had not, he almost, you ever go to the one of those trampoline parks and the wall is bouncy and you hit the wall and you immediately bounce off because you can't inflict any damage on that surface. That's what Cale Makar did to one of the Wild players. He bounced right off of him. He had no impact and he went immediately to the bench. So the injury looked not great, but Jared Bednar, I think, has soothed a lot of the worry when it comes to Cale Makar. Again, as far as him playing, but how effective is he going to be at an individual level? I think whatever you would expect Cale Makar's impact on this series to be, it's going to be a little less. I think that's reasonable. So are we talking a 5-game series becoming a 6-game series? Is Cale Makar at less than 100% worth a game to Vegas in this series? Maybe. But I don't think that if Cale Makar is truly on track to play, and it's not as bad as it looked in game 5, then I still think you back the Colorado Avalanche. I don't think it completely swings this series from Colorado to Vegas. But we won't really know for sure what percentage Cale Makar is or how effective he will be until he's back out on the ice. And I'll put it in this context. And I brought this up because Vegas is not 100% healthy. I will say that Vegas's chances of winning this series go down much more if Mark Stone isn't able to play than if Cale Makar is 85%. 0% of Mark Stone is far more detrimental to Vegas than than losing 15% of Cale Makar or 20% of Cale Makar. I think the most worrisome injury of either team in this series is Mark Stone with Vegas. They don't have him. They're not beating Avalanche. Point blank, period, and they may not last very long in this series. With Cale Makar being less effective than he normally is, could it be good for a Vegas win? It might be. But not enough to swing this series the other way. But we all allow ourselves, because of the lack of communication coming from hockey teams, we allow to take in more. I mean, if Cale steps out onto the ice tomorrow night and he looks completely wrong, then we might have to have a conversation about 50% or 0% of Cale Makar. But everything I'm hearing, I listen to Jared Bednar speak a lot, and reading him not being at practice, I don't think his status for the series is in jeopardy. or even his status for game 1 is in jeopardy. And if that's the case, that's enough of Cale Makar with everything else for the Avs to win. Now, some interesting lines being put out by Jared Bednar today. So McKinnon, Natchez, Landeskog, not totally surprising. The fourth line is back together in all its resplendent glory with Jack Drury, Parker Kelly, and Logan O'Connor, the way it should be if the Avalanche are healthy. The middle six is where things are a little interesting. Not the people who are out there, but what line they are on. So Brock Nelson's line will have Arturi Lehkonen on one side. That's another guy that the Avalanche haven't had in a while. So think about the number of players, Malinsky and Manson and Burns and Lehkonen and Makar, who are all injured. Lehkonen's back, full contact sweater, seems to be good to go. Him playing with Brock Nelson, seen it. Nick Waugh is on the line with Brock Nelson. And then the third line is Kadri, Colton, and Nichushkin. And what this signals to me is that second line is going to be the one that Jared Bednar is tasking with slowing down the top line of Barbashev, Eichel, and Dorofeyev. That's going to be his stopper line. Getting a winger like Nick Waugh, sacrificing some of the offensive prowess of a Val Nichushkin. I think he wants it tough as nails, and not to say that Val isn't. He certainly is. But you got a shutdown two-way center in Brock Nelson, and you got two grinders in Arturi Lehkonen and Nick Waugh. Guys that are going to get into the dirty areas, guys that aren't afraid to be physical. I think that's kind of the idea. And then you have a little bit, and I think you give a little bit of an offensive boost to the third line by adding Val Nichushkin. And Nichushkin I talked about yesterday. He's a two-way forward too. He has something to say about slowing down other teams as well. But what he could do, scoring goals with Kadri, who has been very good at times in these playoffs, and Ross Colton, who is kind of a revelation in Game 5, gives them a little bit more punch. So it's that flip-flopping of Juan Nichushkin that is the interesting thing at practice today for the Colorado Avalanche. But I see the vision in that third line. If what Ross Colton did in Game 5, or even the Minnesota series all told, is real and sustainable with what Nazem Kadri has been at times and what Nichushkin is capable of, that third line could be really scary. But I think that second line is, we're going to try and slow down Vegas with that line. And we'll see, because the Avs tomorrow night and then in Game 2, we'll have the last change. So we'll be able to see what kind of matchups Jared Bednar wants to manipulate and get out there. But I think that second line is you see Jack Eichel, go get him. I think Brock Nelson and Brock Nelson's line and Jack Eichel's line are going to be out there quite a bit together. But we've talked about the Avs' depth. Third line you could see being out there, and you could certainly see the fourth line with how much Jared Bednar loves his fourth line. So I don't think it's going to be just one, but I think this is him prioritizing what's going to be the line when the chips are down, and I need a more defensive-oriented line out there. A little bit with still some ability to generate offense, right? Nelson and Lehkonen are certainly capable of that. That's going to be the second line. But we'll see if these hold for tomorrow night. But the most important aspect of all of this, everybody not named Cale Makar practicing today on the eve of game one. And I don't think Cale Makar's absence from practice necessarily means that you won't see him tomorrow night. Take your thoughts. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, Wemby with an unbelievable performance last night. Starting to get people to believe that maybe the West is going to run through San Antonio sooner rather than later. What can the Nuggets do moving forward in the world of Victor Wembanyama? You'll hear from both Tracy McGrady and Carmelo Anthony of NBC Sports next. Territory Days celebrates its 50th anniversary in Old Colorado City this weekend, May 23rd through the 25th. Enjoy live music, vendors, gold panning, native dancers, and a full kids zone for the low, low price of free admission. Territory Days is sponsored by Air Force Reserve, America's Affordable Building Supply, and Hugh Berger Subaru. Celebrate Territory Days 50th anniversary in Old Colorado City this weekend. So I don't think I'm betraying a trust here with Ray. In fact, I'll let you say it, Ray. Ray, what did you text me last night watching the Spurs and Thunder game?
What I text you?
What did you text me? What was the first thing you text me? You hadn't texted me all game long. You text me something.
You're gonna make me say it on air. Okay.
You didn't curse.
No, I know, but just as a fan, Nuggets aren't close to these two teams.
Yeah, it wasn't a banner evening for the Denver Nuggets. If you're a Nuggets fan. But I think that assessment is correct. I think that there is a sizable gap between the Denver Nuggets and the two teams that are playing in the Western Conference Final. And the Denver Nuggets have to figure out how they can remake their team in order to close that gap. Now, Raj, who you hear contribute to Black and Abdallah 10-1 weekdays here on Extra Sports 1300. Give him credit for this audio. He's on a conference call with Tracy McGrady and Carmelo Anthony, the NBC crew, talking about the Western Conference Finals. And he asked both of them not specifically about Denver, but about the rest of the West, right? Because if a Nuggets fan, Ray, is feeling the way he was about last night, what if you're a Laker fan? What if you're a Houston fan? What if you're a Minnesota fan? So there are a lot of teams that are maybe feeling like they are a long way off from being in a position to knock off either Oklahoma City or San Antonio. Here's Tracy McGrady, who actually says that the Nuggets are not as far off as you may think.
Denver had worked on, building their roster for that because they brought in Cam Johnson. They brought in Tim Hardaway Jr. They brought back Bruce Brown. So they were building for that. In these playoffs, they just wasn't healthy. They had their two brutes, their two tough guys, and Aaron Gordon and Peyton Watson. Those two are vital to their success. So that's why with them, I thought they were built for, OKC or San Antonio, but they wasn't healthy.
And of course, Tracy McGrady's talking about the depth of the Denver Nuggets, that the depth, and he talked about how OKC obviously has depth. We learned that lesson last year, right? Depth matters. But even you look at San Antonio and the depth that they have, and it's getting them, to where they are, Western Conference Final and 1-0 up in the series. And I know not the girl's name with the phone. I'll put my phone away. She's listening. So Tracy McGrady says that they're already doing that. And it kind of goes to what I've been saying. Like, I don't fault Ben Tenzer and John Wallace or whoever it is in that Nuggets organization that striked up a conversation with the Nets about this Porter trade. The Porter trade was a good idea. It just didn't pan out the way in year one that the Nuggets would have wanted. So my focus is actually not necessarily on the depth of the Denver Nuggets. I think that they did everything they could do to try and create more depth. What I'm more looking at is how the core of this team is built. I'm looking at the core of this basketball team, and I'm saying, are they the right players? Are they what the Denver Nuggets need right now to compete? I'm a little bit more interested in how the Nuggets' main players match up with OKC and with San Antonio. But Tracy McGrady's point is well taken. Here's the other thing I will say, though, when it comes to the depth. If you agree with what Tracy McGrady is saying there, then the argument should be for the Nuggets to literally run it back. If they were built in a way that could compete with OKC and San Antonio, then why would you voluntarily get rid of that depth? Now we're getting into the aspect that may not be as widely known nationally, but you and I know this very well here. Although Bennett Durando of the Denver Post had a great write-up basically laying out the reality of the Nuggets' financial situation. But what we've known for a long time, and maybe now nationally they're catching up, the Nuggets aren't going to run it back, because running it back requires them to run afoul of the apron system. And that Stan Kroenke is believed to want to go even further and get out of merely the repeater tax. So if you agree with what Tracy McGrady is saying, fine, but what are you going to say about the way that the Nuggets are built if Peyton Watson and Cam Johnson are gone? Now the Nuggets aren't as deep as they were this year. So if the depth that they acquired was theoretically enough to be able to contend with OKC and San Antonio, you got to keep the depth. You can't lose the depth, because then guess what? You're less deep. You're shallow. So I get what Tracy McGrady is saying, and I certainly do not still begrudge the Nuggets and say that, wow, the Michael Porter trade was a swing and a miss. It wasn't. It was the right idea, and it just didn't work. And yes, health was a part of that. But one of the two guys that Tracy McGrady mentioned are not going to be with the team next year. So if the Nuggets aren't able to get to San Antonio or OKC because Aaron Gordon and Peyton Watson are hurt, what if both of them are gone or one of them is gone? So that's the problem with what Tracy McGrady is saying, is that the Nuggets figured to not be as deep as they were a year ago. So how much depth can they sacrifice for the sake of balancing the Kroenke Sports Empire checkbook and still have enough depth to be able to compete with San Antonio and Oklahoma City? And then still on the depth conversation, but a different aspect of it, here's Carmelo Anthony on something that he notices with both San Antonio and OKC.
They've built through the draft. They've drafted a lot of these guys. They went out there and they, scouted and they looked at the development process, and they actually developed a lot of these guys too. So it's been a buildup of just development in a lot of these and those two organizations. So with that comes more depth, more players that you can develop, more guys that you can bring them through the program, teach them what you want, give them a role, and now you feel like you're a part of something bigger.
And again, makes some sense. there was somebody that was here in Colorado that was trying to do this. His name was Calvin Booth. He said, this is the way. By the way, Mandalorian and Grogu out this Friday. Unsolicited for no reason. I'm not even a huge fan of it, but my son watches it, and I know that is said quite a bit in the show. Anyway, that's what Calvin Booth said. And then what happened? He had a coach that didn't play those guys. And here's the chicken or the egg. Did the draft picks of the Denver Nuggets not hit because Michael Malone didn't want to play them, or did Michael Malone not want to play these guys because they weren't good enough? And this goes to what OKC and San Antonio have done, because it's a little like, I get it, draft and develop. I thought at the time with Calvin Booth that the reasoning was sound, the idea, it made sense as an avenue for the Denver Nuggets to go down. Here's the difference. Where was Victor Wembanyama drafted? Number 1. Where did Dylan Harper go? Wasn't he the second pick in this draft? Steph Castle. After the Wizards and the Hawks chasing after their own Wemby went with Risha Say and Alex Sarr, I think he was, what, 3rd, 4th, 5th, something like that? Ray's, I think, checking on that for me. But and even you look at, Oklahoma City, they've done a little bit better job of finding guys a little bit later, but Chet Holmgren was the top of the draft type of guy. Steph Castle was taken 4th. So taking OKC out of it for a moment, San Antonio has created their depth with a handful of top 5 draft picks. I think Jamal Murray was taken 6th, and I think he's the highest draft pick of anybody on the team. So in theory, yes, draft and develop, sure, but man, you are really threading the needle when you're picking in the 20s. Like, San Antonio was able to do this because they were very crappy for a very long time. And even when they got Wemby got hurt, they were right back at the top of the draft. So I'm not saying that draft and develop is a bad idea, but the further you go down on the draft board, the more you absolutely have got to hit the ball out of the park, because you're not getting as sure a thing as Dylan Harper is. Like, look, last night as a rookie, he was fantastic beyond his years in his performance. You and I both know that Dylan Harper was going to be great. Maybe not right this second, but who are the people doubting Dylan Harper? Steph Castle, it blew my mind at the time that he went as late as he did. Like, we watched every game of this guy's career at UConn. How could Atlanta and Washington look at what Steph Castle did at UConn and saying, give me Risha Say and Sarr? So, like, the guys, and even Victor Wembanyama, again, early on the timeline, absolutely nobody within their right mind. I didn't doubt that Victor Wembanyama was going to be great. But these are all guys taken in the top 10 of the draft. OKC, a lot of now they've certainly found some diamonds in the rough, but even a few of their guys are all higher draft picks than these guys that the Denver Nuggets are bringing in. So all of this stuff in theory makes sense. But if you kind of miss on these guys, or your organization, more specifically your head coach, isn't bought into that vision, and these guys, they're not going to hit. And here's the bad news of as far as what Carmelo said. I think Carmelo's talking about the next team. You know, Ray, during the break, threw out the idea of like Portland maybe being the next team that jumps up here. Yeah, how bad has Portland been lately? Like, I think what Carmelo is talking about is like the next team, like Minnesota, LA, Denver. Sorry, you've aged out. You've traded all your draft capital. You can't do any of this. Carmelo's speaking to the next generation of Western Conference contender. He's talking about Utah. He's talking about Portland. It's not feasible for LA or Denver or Minnesota to be able to find Dylan Harper or Steph Castle. They're never drafting high enough. They've been good for too long. And it just speaks to the lost years here that we have been kind of going through with the Denver Nuggets, because for one reason or another, and we don't need to re-legislate the whole thing, but for one reason or another, Holmes, Strother, Peyton Watson just hit, and he's probably out the door. Christian Brown hit initially, and he's faded off. Jalen Pickett, like all of these guys, they don't have anything in all of these guys. The only one that you think has any value right now is Peyton Watson. He's about to show his value on the open market. Like the draft and develop stuff, the Nuggets tried that. For whatever reason, it didn't work, and now they're beyond it. They have no draft capital. It underlines just how precarious a position that the Denver Nuggets are in. Because they wanted to do the draft and develop thing, and they wanted to do it maybe a little bit earlier than most people, thought. They started doing it. They tried to do it well before Indiana and OKC met in an NBA Finals last year. But it didn't work. And to Tracy McGrady's point about the depth, you got to have depth. Nuggets had depth. They just weren't healthy. Okay, but two of their 3, Valanciunas is as good as gone. I've been saying Cam, Peyton Watson, Aaron Gordon, 2 of those 3 guys are gone. Do we know that Tim Hardaway's coming back? So the newfound depth of the Denver Nuggets might be a one and done thing. Doesn't have to be, because all it costs you to keep this team together is money. But we know that's the crux of the whole thing with the Denver Nuggets. They don't want to spend to keep this team together. 719-24/7-1313. More Drive Time Sports after this. While we're on the Nuggets topic here, I think there's an aspect of this that hasn't been talked about a lot, and I'll give Ray credit. I even want to bring you in on this conversation, Ray, just continuing from what we had during the break. You asked me a question about Arsenal, right? One of the teams in the Kroenke Sports empire. They just won a title. Yes.
Yes.
Where are they at in terms of payroll in the Premier League?
They're right behind Manchester, so they're second.
You got just a little soccer tip. You need to definitely say which Manchester it is. It's City,
yes,
not United.
Yeah, that's where I got. Yeah, you're right.
Right. Very, very important because people like me who like Manchester United don't want City to get the moniker of Manchester. They are City, we are United. Anyway, stuck up soccer guy thing. Anyway, they're second.
Right.
They're second in payroll in a league that has no salary cap. Okay, that is baseball over there in England. Okay, they could spend as much as they want, and they're second in the Premier League. Okay, when the Denver Nuggets won, or for many years, and this is where you do have to give, the Kroenkes their just due a little bit here. When the Nuggets were building towards a title, and when they won one, they were one of the most expensive rosters in the NBA. Avalanche and Rams are a little bit more apples to oranges because they have salary caps. NHL has a hard salary cap. So, yes, obviously the Avs have had to perpetually make moves. They're always right up against the salary cap. So if you want to bring them into the conversation, I'm sure the Rams are the same way with Stafford and Puka and all those guys. I'm sure they are very close to the salary cap in the NFL. My point here is the line that Josh Kroenke mentioned during his post-season press conference was the joke is we will invest on the on-field product, the on-court product. And that's long been the other slight of the way the Kroenkes do business as in regards to Tim Connolly. Right? The whole idea of Tim Connolly leaving is that the Kroenke ideology is we'll pay for the players, but as removed from the players as we get, we are not as willing to pay top of market value. And that's why Tim Connolly moved to Minnesota. So that was always the running joke. They're not willing to pay coaches. David Adelman's one of the lowest paid coaches in the NBA now. I'm sure that their general manager tandem, two of them don't make what Daryl Morey was making with the Philadelphia 76ers. So that's always been there. But they have invested in the on-court, on-field product when they are on the verge of winning a title. Part of this discussion about the Nuggets reportedly trying to get under the repeater tax, not the second apron. And I've always said the second apron, with how much it just puts you in a bind, I don't have a problem with the team trying to get out of the second apron to keep roster flexibility. I don't have a problem with that. Okay. But there's a first apron, there's a repeater tax, all that kind of stuff. There are other levels that aren't as punitive to your ability to build a team that the Nuggets can live in. And the belief is that they don't want to. Why? They're willing to spend more than Liverpool and Manchester United. They were willing to spend more than most everybody else a few years ago with the Denver Nuggets. What has changed? I think an aspect of this that is very telling, if this is true, right? Because Josh Kroenke tried to kind of push back against this idea a little bit, right? The idea that the Nuggets aren't going to be willing to pay money. If this team was as close as some people would make you believe with the players they have and the depth that they have, the Nuggets would not be trying to get out of the repeater tax. They could just pay it. If they had a team that they felt in their heart of hearts was one step away from winning a title, they would truly run it back. Now, they'd still have to make a move to get under the second apron. But if they're going to, that's a letting Peyton Watson go. That's a trading Cam Johnson, right? That gets you out of the second apron. If they want to go below the repeater tax, that's where you take Gordon, Johnson, and Watson and pick two of them. And that's where you don't add to your team in a significant way. If the Cronkies, and it will be telling this offseason, right? And here's the tiny positive that I'm going to weave into this. Okay? We thought that the Denver Nuggets weren't willing to do what it took to get closer to Oklahoma City. And they traded Michael Porter. They traded a key member of their core who helped them win a title. They were not only willing, but able to do it. I still hold out a little bit, if you want to call it hope, whatever it is, a little something that maybe the Nuggets do it again like they did last year, where we're like, I don't think they're going to really do anything. I don't know what they can do unless they're going to do this. And then they did that thing. But if this offseason, the Denver Nuggets end up shedding enough payroll to get out of the repeater tax, that to me is a clear and obvious signal to you that they are not close to San Antonio and OKC. What you and I saw last night and Ray saw last night watching San Antonio and OKC, that's real. There's a gap that exists between these teams. And we don't have a chance to fully test it because we didn't get the Spurs-Nuggets series that we were supposed to get. But you watch these teams and you don't think that the Nuggets are on that level. I think if the Nuggets shed payroll to get under the repeater tax, they're agreeing with you. That's exactly what they're saying. Because their history is that if they have a team that is so close on the precipice of winning a title, they will push the limits financially. They will push up their payroll to get that championship. If they're not a step away, if they're not particularly close, then what is the point of paying dollar for dollar into any tax if essentially the team that the Nuggets have right now is not that much better than the team we saw when Jamal Murray was hurt, right? Where Nikola Jokic dragged the team into the playoffs, dragged them through a series. If they get under the repeater tax, Stan Kroenke is looking at this Nuggets team saying they're closer to that than they are the two teams that we saw play game one of the Western Conference Final. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, the three stories that are driving the show on 740 KVOR and Extra Sports 1300. Hello there. Welcome in. Glad to have you. Appreciate you listening to the show on Extra Sports 1300 and 740 KVOR or watching anywhere you may scroll. If you would like to get in touch with the show, the lines of communication wide open for you. You could call or text 719-247-1313, or if you are watching the live stream of the show, you could drop a comment on your social media platform of choice, and we will get to that as well. Perhaps the three stories that are driving this show today may pique your interest. Here we go with those. All right, we start with an unreal performance from a guy that really doesn't seem like he's from this earth.
Behind the plate, 5-on-4. Wemby's going to pull a deep three. Oh, my goodness.
NBC Peacock on the call. Victor Wembanyama watched Shai Gilgeous-Alexander get handed the MVP trophy that he felt was rightfully his, and he said, I'm going to take something from you. 41 points, 24 rebounds, and the San Antonio Spurs in a double overtime classic beat the reigning champions. This is all not supposed to be happening. The San Antonio Spurs are not supposed to be capable of going toe-to-toe with the reigning champions and beating them in a playoff series. They got to learn their lessons. They got to suffer heartbreak. But when you have a player like Victor Wembanyama, maybe you can skip steps. I mean, I'm sure Victor Wembanyama skips many steps when he goes up the stairs because, you know, why would he take every step when you have legs that can probably go up 4 steps at a time? But metaphorically speaking, I just think that Wemby is such, and I mean this in the best way possible, freak, that maybe the Spurs don't have to. They don't have to wait around. They don't have to suffer playoff heartbreak. Maybe they are just so good. And a little bit of what Minnesota is to Denver when it comes to OKC. Like, there are basketball reasons why the Thunder don't look as invincible as they do against other teams against the Spurs. But again, this is the postseason. There's another few layers on top of this, that a team full of 20-year-olds is not supposed to be able to beat the team that just won the title. But when you have a player like Victor Wembanyama who impacts the game on both ends of the floor to a degree that no one else currently in the NBA does. Did you see OKC dribble into the paint and make a hard left turn right out of it when Wemby was looking at him? Did you see the jump shot that he made? Jump shot. It was basically a half-court heave that he took like a normal shot. Through Victor Wembanyama, maybe all of this is possible for the San Antonio Spurs. And you look throughout the roster, a Steph Castle, Dylan Harper especially, spot start for De'Aaron Fox, puts up 24 points as a rookie. Like, how could you not play with Victor Wembanyama and go, yeah, the rules that have been placed in terms of what needs to happen for us, they don't matter. Anything and everything is possible with Victor Wembanyama on our team. And it reminds me of 2019. Because 2019 was when the Nuggets got into the playoffs, and there was a specific game that reminded me of last night. It was Game 3 in 2019 between the Nuggets and the Blazers. That was 4 overtimes. That was Nikola Jokic putting in an hour and 5 minutes on the court. And while the Nuggets lost that game, I think that was where everybody realized that with Nikola Jokic, anything and everything was possible with the Denver Nuggets because he was so unique, so different, and had the ability to completely take over a basketball game in many different ways. Wemby only had 3 blocks last night. It wasn't because he was missing on his blocks. It's because the Thunder wouldn't dare put up a shot in his general vicinity. And if you're a Nuggets fan, especially with what they're dealing with now, you would give anything, wouldn't you, to go back to that moment, marveling at Nikola Jokic? I mean, we still marvel at him, but marveling at him with the idea of limitless potential for the team that he plays for. That's the moment that the Spurs are living in now. They may still not win this series, but it is abundantly clear it is not going to take them long. Just a otherworldly performance from Victor Wembanyama last night, and there were a few other supporting cast members that far exceeded my expectation as well. In a game that I actually thought yesterday the Spurs would win, but the performance by them was so much better than even I imagined. And this series already hyped up, already very interesting. It's must-watch television moving forward. Not because of the team on the other side, although it's must-watch television to see them implode the way they did, and Shea shoot as poorly as he did, and Alex Caruso get butthurt about cameras in the huddle, to watch Oklahoma City come undone the way they did last night. And to watch the Spurs put on that kind of performance, specifically Victor Wembanyama. I mean, the only way you should miss any of these games is if you're an Avs fan and you have, tomorrow night, you're gonna watch the Avs, but maybe tape Victor Wembanyama in game 2. Speaking of the Avs, here is story number 2.
I'm not going to talk a whole bunch about them, but we certainly respect them. They have been the top team of the National Hockey League all year long. We know that. Come to playoffs, we join together, right? I think it's 2 good teams probably playing some of their best hockey starting the series. Let's have at it.
That is Vegas head coach John Tortorella not wanting to give the Avs too many of their flowers, not trying to make this an even steeper uphill climb than it's already going to be to beat the Colorado Avalanche. But today, that best team in the league pretty much all season is now pretty much intact. Everyone not named Cale Makar was practicing for the Colorado Avalanche. Arturi Lehkonen was back. Brent Burns was back. Malinsky and Manson have been back for a couple of days. They are as close to full strength as well. I can't even remember the last time the Avs were at this close to full strength, even before the playoffs started, which makes them that much more difficult for the Vegas Golden Knights to beat. Now, as far as Cale Makar not practicing, I would not press the panic button yet. Cale Makar's place on this team, his role in this team, there's no mixing and matching with Cale Makar. If he's playing, he's on the top power play, he's in the top D pairing. These other guys, Lehkonen, Burns, Malinsky, you got to figure out where you're going to put them. So that's what practice is for. I would not read into Cale Makar not practicing today as his status for game 1 is in serious jeopardy. Because I just don't think he needs to, quite frankly, needs to be out there like some of the other guys that are recovering from injury. But we'll find that out tomorrow night. The other interesting note, the middle 6 of the Colorado Avalanche, fully healthy, save for Cale Makar. And Cale Makar is not a forward. So the the 4 forward lines. Little bit of shuffling going on. Top line at practice today: McKinnon, Natchez, Landeskog. You've seen that before. Second line: Brock Nelson, Arturi Lehkonen, and Nick Waugh. Third line: Kadri, Colton, Nichushkin. And the fourth line is back together in full with Parker Kelly, Jack Drury, and Logan O'Connor. That second line is interesting. That second line screams to me, this is the we're going to make life difficult for Jack Eichel line. Getting Nick Waugh in there, maybe sacrificing some offensive play to make whatever line they go up against make their lives a living you know what. So I think that's the shutdown line. I think that's what Jared Bednar's thought here is. And then you put Nichushkin with Kadri and Colton, and you give them a little bit of a boost offensively. And I think with Kadri center in line with Nichushkin, with what he did for Ross Colton the other night, I think maybe it could get Nichushkin going a little bit offensively. Now, I will, again, go back to something I said yesterday. Nichushkin, two-way forward. Brock Nelson, two-way forward. Let's not make them one-dimensional. If they chip in offensively, that's great. It makes the Avalanche that much better. But their games are unique to some of these other players. If they slow down the line that they're playing against, that is mission accomplished. You have McKinnon, you have Natchez, you have Landeskog, you have that fourth line, you have Makar, Taves. Like, there are other guys who could pick up the slack offensively. I don't want to put it to Val Nichushkin that he has to have the best offensive series of anybody, because if he's well-balanced, if he's creating pressure on the defensive end and chipping in scoring goals, then that's great. But interesting combinations for Jared Bednar in advance of game one, and we'll see tomorrow night at 6 how these are actually employed, because the Avs will get last change tomorrow night. Sticking with hockey for story number 3.
Free and taken by Alexander Carrier. Headman's the puck. Shot. Score! Montreal wins game 7.
Sean McDonough on the call for ESPN. The Montreal Canadiens beat the Buffalo Sabres in New York 3-2 in overtime. And you will remember the name Newhook. Yes, formerly of Avs fame. Alex Newhook, traded for Arturi Lehkonen, is now starring for Montreal. He scored 6 goals in this series, including the series winner. And I think this entire series you've kind of looked at, and with him and Bo Byram, if you're an Avs fan, you feel good about those two guys being successful, because the upside was there, but the timeline didn't work. The Avalanche could not wait on those two guys to realize their full potential. They had to make moves for more veteran players to address more immediate needs. But both Newhook and Byram had it in them to be good players in this league, very good players in this league. And I think both of them have found their ability to do that with Montreal and Buffalo. So good for Alex Newhook to be the hero for the most storied franchise in the sport last night. Now, on the Buffalo side of things, some of their wounds in this game were self-inflicted. The power play they gave up at the end of the first period to allow the Canadiens to take a 2-0 lead, that was of their own doing. But they were hard done by the officiating with 10 minutes to go in the third period. It has to be said. Did it ultimately decide the game? You know where I stand on that. There's a lot of other minutes in order to compensate. Okay, but that doesn't mean that the referees didn't get it wrong. And the shot that Dobish saved 5-hole was immediately poked out, immediately, and was sliding towards the end line, which would have given Buffalo a 3-2 lead. The play was wrongly whistled dead. The play was stopped. It should not have been. And you might be saying, well, isn't there a review system in place? There is. The problem is that once a second Sabres player came over and made sure it went in the net, and I don't blame him for it, you're going to just stand there watching it and hoping that Dobish doesn't turn around and dive on it? No, you're going to hit it in the back of the net. But by doing that, Buffalo took away their own chance of it getting reviewed and overturned. So the initial problem was the referees. They should not have blown that play dead. They should have let it continue. And then a second Sabre batting at it wouldn't have mattered. It would have been perfectly legal. But then once the whistle goes, can't bat it in. So just poor officiating, absolutely. But a little bit compounded by, I don't even want to say it's an honest mistake. If you're in that situation, you're doing that. You just are. But it was a moment where Buffalo could have taken the lead and did not, and they eventually lost in overtime to Montreal. So now it'll be the Canadiens and Hurricanes. Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Final coming up on Thursday. Yeah, they better not start before they have. So we've been waiting for 8 days. 719-247-1313. Your thoughts on the 3 stories that are driving the show next. Territory Days celebrates its 50th anniversary this weekend in Old Colorado City, Saturday through Monday. Enjoy great food, a beer and wine garden, vendors, gold panning, native dancers, and much more. And admission is free. Territory Days is sponsored by Great Clips, Kingdom Builders, Family Life Center, and Huberger Subaru. Celebrate Memorial Day weekend in Old Colorado City with Territory Days. 719-247-1313 if you want to get in on the conversation. Been mostly Avs and Wemby conversation. To the latter, I turn to my producer, Ray Dominguez. What do we got on the text line?
From Brandon, this series is the battle of tanking franchises, and San Antonio is showing how you properly build and draft when tanking. Unfortunately, the Nuggets won't be able to achieve this. However, we need to trade a big piece, unfortunately, to help Jokic.
Could not agree more. And go back to what I was saying in response to the what Tracy McGrady and Carmelo Anthony said about and McGrady specifically about the Denver Nuggets, but just in what everyone else in the West can do. And Carmelo Anthony brings up that these teams are draft and develop. Well, the Nuggets kind of tried that. And it didn't work. Bottom line, didn't work. Blame who you want. They're both fired anyway. It didn't work. And now they are devoid of draft capital, except this year. And I can't get behind the hype for a guy that's projected to go 25th. I just can't. We did this already with Holmes and Brown and Watson and Pickett. And it's like, to your point, Dylan Harper was the second pick. Wemby was the first pick. Steph Castle went number 6. The Nuggets haven't had any of those guys since Jamal Murray. So if you want to truly rebuild around Nikola Jokic, then go that route. Get a first-round pick for Jamal Murray. Get one for Aaron Gordon, although I don't know that that's actually feasible because you still have to take back money in return. I just don't think – I think there was a moment when Calvin Booth came down from the mountaintop and said, this is what we got to do to coincidentally be the Spurs. Not this Spurs, the other Spurs. Right? Under Tim Duncan, pivoting from the team that Tim Duncan joined to the team that Tim Duncan led with Ginobili and Parker and the rest. He said this is the way the Nuggets need to go. And I and many others said, great idea. You got to hit on your draft picks, bro. You can't miss on these guys. And the only one that right now seems like maybe the Nuggets hit is Peyton Watson. And is he even going to be a Nugget next year? And it still took him, like this whole time, the Nuggets have been trying to get back to the title, and Peyton Watson wasn't what he was this year. So the flaw in the thinking of, well, you got to draft is one, the Nuggets are beyond that. And even when they were in that window, they missed. Julian Strother, there's another name. They missed. But to be fair, they didn't have the top pick, the second pick, the 6th pick, the 4th pick, the 9th pick. I mean, tanking is so funny, isn't it? Because I feel like tanking and flopping are akin to one another in this regard. Who you are criticizing for doing the flopping or tanking shows what your affinity is. The Oklahoma City Thunder tanked to get to where they are now. There's no arguing with that. The Spurs did too. The Spurs tanked. They got Wemby. Wemby got hurt. They tanked again. They've tanked. But yet, Nobody today seems to have a problem with San Antonio tanking, but they have a problem with OKC tanking. You have a problem with Shea flopping. You don't have a problem with Nikola Jokic flopping. It's fine, but I'm just saying it's showing where your allegiance lies. To me, tanking is tanking is tanking. Tanking is a viable way to build up your team. It's not the most savory way to do it, but it is. And OKC and San Antonio have done it effectively to build the teams that they currently have. The Denver Nuggets have not tanked in a long, long time. And the ping pong balls have not been kind to them because they get no ping pong balls. They're stuck where they are. Playoff team, you're stuck where you are. So, yeah, draft and develop. Great way. You're going to tear this thing down and get back. And also, are you even going to get back? Like, it's not even a possibility for the Denver Nuggets. It's not, can't even entertain it. It's not possible. That ship has sailed. The only thing that the Denver Nuggets can do right now, to the texter's other point, is you take something of value, which we know they're not going to trade Jokic. It's either Murray or it's Aaron Gordon, and you get somebody that somebody else drafted in the lottery, and you bring them onto your team. I threw out the trade idea yesterday for Asar Thompson, basically being the centerpiece. Detroit needs bona fide scorers, shot makers. Jamal Murray is that. The Pistons can afford to give up a little bit of defense. The Nuggets need defense. Asar Thompson's young. You can make him a part of your new core around Nikola Jokic moving forward. But that's the kind of trade that they have to make. Or I should say what I think they should make. Because I'm just not okay with we're going to trade a core member of our team for someone that didn't work out elsewhere. Right? Aaron Gordon for Julius Randle. Let's just rearrange these deck chairs. Why don't we? Jamal Murray for Kevin Durant. Let's get somebody who has burned the bridge out of every NBA city he's ever known. And had his teammates turn against him in over almost every NBA city he's lived in. Let's sign up for that. That would instill hope in an entire fan base. Getting Kevin Durant. That is a viable trade path for the Denver Nuggets. I don't think it gets them where they need to go. I really think there are only two ways to go about it here. You truly believe that it was only injuries that kept you from getting to where you want to go, and you bring back every single one of these players. Or you take a significant piece of your team, because that's the only thing that's going to draw any trade interest, and you get the right type of player, and you get a younger player, a cheaper player, but someone who could become a core player. Kind of like the Spurs did, right? That Kawhi Leonard guy that they got that one time. Nuggets just don't have the draft capital to get anybody for themselves. They have to have somebody else do the scouting and be able to play these young players and say, oh, that one definitely works, and we'll go get him. Because the drafting and developing thing for the Denver Nuggets has not worked well. Those are the only two ways that I think that you could go about it and have any hope that next year will end better than this one did. But there unfortunately is another option that it feels like the Nuggets are going to take, which is we're going to do none of that. And we're going to run back as much of this roster as we can until we hit the repeater tax, and then we will let everybody else go. I don't know how much worse the Denver Nuggets would get under that scenario, but I know how much better they would get, and that is none better. But as I said earlier, if the Nuggets go that route and they get out of the repeater tax and slash payroll to that extent, that is a clear signal from the Kroenke Sports empire that this team is not close. When their teams that they own are close, they'll pay that extra dollar. If they're slashing payroll to just avoid paying dollar for dollar over the tax, that's them signaling they don't think they're close to what we saw in the Western Conference Final last night. 719-24-7-1313. Back after this. Drive Time Sports. Tomorrow night, game 1, Avs and Golden Knights. You could hear it at 6 on Extra Sports 1300. You will hear a lot from the Avs camp on tomorrow's show leading into game 1, including a very cute moment between Gabriel Landeskog and Nathan McKinnon. They're buddies. You'll probably see it on social media. So it's like the Office bit where Jim keeps correcting Dwight when he says he's an assistant regional manager, and Jim keeps saying to the. Well, whoever was running the press conference today called Nathan McKinnon also the captain, right? He said captains Gabriel Landeskog and Nathan McKinnon. What do you say?
No. He said captain for the Avalanche, Gabriel Landeskog, and then forward Nathan McKinnon. And then
so it wasn't that Nathan McKinnon was correcting that he's only the assistant captain. It's that they did not recognize that he is the assistant.
So that's
captain.
why he whispered assistant, like he was an assistant.
Well, now Nathan McKinnon's going to go out and score 5 goals tomorrow night. He's angry. This is like when they handed them the Labubu in Italy. He's Nathan McKinnon. He might be smiling. He might be joking. He's angry. You do not hand him a Labubu, and you do not refer to him merely as forward.
No.
Nathan McKinnon. Disrespectful. And the guy was, I think at one time tweeted out "Go Knights" on his Twitter account. So even more of a reason. Remember that when everyone got in a tizzy because the head of officiating 5 years ago tweeted out "Thunder up."
Thunder up.
The fix is in.
Oh,
it was not a good look, in fairness, but different lives back then. Anyway, so what were you, Ray? What were you saying during the break as far as trying to stop me from raining on everyone's parade? Because I know that's your goal here. You brought up a team that is, I think, going to play at the top of the hour. I believe that game is with the New York Knickerbockers. Right.
So my question was, because everybody keeps saying, well, you got to draft. That's how the new wave's going to be. That's what the successful teams are. You got to draft.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then I pointed out, what about the Knicks? They have 1 or 2 homegrown, but the rest is all free agents, trades, and players like that. And they've been in the Eastern Conference Final twice, back to back. They were there last year, right?
Yeah, and I think the good point that you bring up is that even in copycat leagues, there has to be more than one way to skin a cat, right?
Right.
There's not one. It's like our social media discourse. It's the one true opinion. There's not one true way to win in the NBA. There are things that you really need, like depth. I think we can all agree depth is very important, but you can go about, like, that's the premise. You got to have depth, right? And we can agree on that. I don't think we all say that a team that can't go 6 deep on their roster is capable of winning a title in the NBA right now. Just not. That's the premise we all agree on. How you get there, to your point about the Knicks, is a good one. There are different paths to take to get there. And that's why I keep pushing back against, Carmelo Anthony's assertion that you heard earlier that, it's draft and develop. Like, yeah, that's what they did. But to your point, it's not available to everybody. And there may be other ways to go about it. Here's the issue with the Knicks. Okay, they gave up draft capital to get Mikal Bridges. Jalen Brunson was quite the unique case because Dallas, despite having a very good season, decided Jalen Brunson is not a franchise-type player, and so they were able to sign them in free agency. There's another Nuggets problem. They don't have any money. Here's another NBA-wide problem. Free agency is dead. No one becomes a free agent anymore. and because supermaxes and restricted free agency and nobody has any money. Karl Anthony Towns is, I think Josh Hart, you have to remind me how they acquired Josh Hart, but Karl Anthony Towns was the type of trade that I'm saying I'm not over the moon about, right? We take somebody that's maybe, I don't want to say not working, but somebody on our roster that is part of our core, well compensated, and we just trade him for a similar player elsewhere, just to shake things up. Not necessarily us getting a much better player, but just us getting a different player to maybe do some other things and get the most out of him. Karl Anthony Towns for Julius Randle was that. That's one, and maybe it was kind of the finishing touch on this Knicks team. If we're looking at it and they get to the NBA Finals, that Karl Anthony Towns trade was kind of, or I guess Mikal Bridges came later, but that kind of trade is available. That's why I say, I mean, Jamal Murray has to be the one that's traded because you could get some back. Can you do that multiple times through the roster to be able to get to where you want to go? And would we even say that Karl Anthony Towns is the most important piece of the New York Knicks? He's not. It's Jalen Brunson, which they got it a different way. But I think your point is a great one in saying that, look, the drafting thing, it's not possible. Mm-hmm. So are there other ways? Yes, there's a team in the Eastern Conference Final that has not drafted and developed, and they are 4 wins away from going to the conference finals. And
they fired their coach last year.
So I guess this is the conference final you want to watch if you want hope as a Nuggets fan, right? Because you're looking at what the Spurs and Thunder are doing, how they got to this point. You're saying, well, we can't do any of that. You look to the Knicks, say they can. Mm-hmm. You look to
even the Cavs.
But Garland, they drafted and they parlayed into James Harden. What drafted guy are the Nuggets going to be able to parlay into a James Harden?
Oh, Christian
Brown?
Yeah.
For Christian Brown for Kawhi, who says no? Okay, if LeBron's that's going to happen
there anywhere, so
yeah, LeBron is going to go to LA if he thinks they have a chance at winning. But so they drafted and developed Garland to a certain point, Mobley to a certain point, Jared Allen, and they took one of those guys and traded him for somebody else. So Allen and Mobley are drafted and developed guys. But they did get Donovan Mitchell, and they did get James Harden.
Right.
So, and that's why I say I still leave open the possibility, however slim it might be, that maybe this organization does have the ability to make a trade that we look at and we say, well, that makes sense. Now I can kind of see the vision here. And that was the Michael Porter trade last year. We're like, oh, they are acquiring depth. They're just taking this piece. So there's a chance that the Nuggets could do something. What we're going to have to see is if that's enough, and I don't see how they can make a move with someone not named Jamal Murray and us be looking at the trade and saying that the Nuggets got I don't know if better's the word I want to use, changed themselves in the way they need to. Right. I just don't see how they're going to be able to do that, trading anyone other than Jamal Murray.
So the night you're going to have to look at is the first night of the draft, because that's when.
Oh, I forgot. It's 2 days. That's so stupid. Yeah. Anyway, go on.
Because no one in the second round matters. I'll go eat some Taco Bell. Anyways, because the Nuggets can't make a trade with their pick until draft night, right?
Correct.
So I feel if there's going to be a big move that happens, it's going to be that draft night.
And when is the draft?
June 23rd.
That's forever.
I know. Luckily, we have the Avs.
That's exactly what I was going to say. At least we have the Avs.
But if they let's say they did the Jamal Kevin Durant thing, okay,
Okay.
and then they went and they traded Cam and they got a guard and they added some athletic pieces around it. Would that be enough?
But what's that last part? You can't just like yada yada. The like those are the very guys that we don't think that they can get, and they have one on the roster in Peyton Watson that we think is as good as gone. So where do those other guys come into play? I think it's very difficult for them to acquire them. Now, I will take your initial premise with Kevin Durant, and you trade Cam Johnson for a ball handler, essentially. So you get a decent point guard, whoever that might be. Okay. Now you have Brown at the 2. You have Kevin Durant at the 3, Gordon and Jokic.
Honestly, I would look for a shooting guard and have Brown come off the bench.
But my point is that starting 5 that much better or better equipped to compete
than what we have now? Honestly, I'm not saying it's a huge upgrade. I don't know. No, actually, I would say no.
Well, I'll tell you one guy whose trade value is might go up a little bit if San Antonio finishes this thing off. Giannis.
Yep.
Because there will be an organization, and maybe that organization is Denver, that they will go, the only guy that we could possibly acquire that has any chance at corralling Victor Wembanyama is Giannis, if he's healthy. Now, is like the Giannis thing as far as the Nuggets is a moot point because the Nuggets don't have the capital. Getting back to the Knicks thing, where the Knicks gave up a lot of draft capital to get the veteran players. Nuggets don't have that, but in theory, you would have. Here are the two things that I believe can go up against Victor Wembanyama. I still think OKC can win the series, but that's going to be more about what they can do. They can't have Dylan Harper scoring 24 or Steph Castle, right? Like Oklahoma City can limit everybody else. But the only two remedies for going up against Victor Wembanyama right now, a healthy Giannis and Nikola Jokic.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Those are the only two things that I think we have seen any sample size of that could work. But Giannis is perpetually not healthy anymore. And the Nuggets don't have a good enough team or the right kind of team around Nikola Jokic to even get to San Antonio, let alone beat San Antonio. But we saw it. We saw it in the regular season that what Nikola Jokic does, the impact that he has in multiple facets of the game, can counteract the same impact that Victor Wembanyama has, right? Victor, whether he gets blocks or just alters shots or guys just don't take shots around him, that's one. Scoring, rebounding, right? All things that Victor impacts the game in those ways. Jokic impacts the game in as many ways as Victor does.
Yes,
and those things can kind of cancel each other out. So that's all is a healthy Giannis, which is a unicorn at this point, and having Nikola Jokic. And therein lies your hope. You were looking, I know all show long, you were looking for a shred of hope to cling to.
I look at that every time I walk in the studio. Anyways,
You're getting better at comedy.
There's another guy
okay,
who is hurt all the time, but he does decent against Wemby and would be less for trade. Just have to call up Washington real quick.
AD. Haven't I said that I would be down for AD?
If he's healthy, I mean, but that's the hard part.
Well, take the emotion out of it. Okay. In the last minute we have, take the emotion out of it. Take the Mr. Nugget out of it. Would you say that trading Aaron Gordon for Anthony Davis actually gets the Nuggets closer to what they would need to compete in the West moving forward than what they have with Aaron Gordon?
No. because the reason you would trade Aaron Gordon is because of his health issues. So
But that's what I'm saying. Isn't that but they're both unhealthy or both been hurt the last couple of years. Now you have a rim protector in AD.
You
going to go for that?
No, I'm still saying no that one. Maybe. I'm on the fence.
AD for Jamal Murray.
Oh, my.
Just all the bigs.
And Trae Young.
There you go. We'll leave it there. Back tomorrow to preview game 1.